What is going on, everyone? Welcome to 24/7 Football. And the big news coming out of football today is that Manchester City have had their 2-year ban from European club competitions imposed on them by UEFA expelled by the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So this all started back when Manchester City, their emails were leaked by Der Spiegel, a German publisher, which alleged to show financial doping in the terms of inflating or overinflating their sponsorship revenues. So UEFA conducted their own investigation, which Manchester City didn't cooperate with because they said that they had sent all of their information already to UEFA. There was nothing more to send, so City didn't cooperate. UEFA had their own investigation. They found Manchester City guilty. City came out with a statement saying that they were disappointed but not surprised, and they fully intended to appeal, and they took it to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. And that is the appeal that has been going on for the last few weeks, months even, and we've just had the result today. Now, before we go into it, obviously you all know that I am a City fan, and I'm happy, I'm happy. But if this was any other club, I'd still look at it in the same light. I'd like to think that I'm not a biased Manchester City fan, and I'll look at the facts and we'll judge the case and we'll look at what has actually happened. Basically, what is the Court of Arbitration for Sport, CAS as it's known for short? Well, it's an international body established in 1984. So basically, it's if there is an issue within sport, like an appeal or like a ruling, and someone's decided to appeal against it, it goes to the Court of Arbitration for Sport if it's a high enough level. And the Court of Arbitration for Sport is non-biased and it's completely independent. So in this case of Manchester City versus UEFA, it had no bias to Manchester City, it had no bias to UEFA, it heard both sides and it made its own independent judgment. And basically their say is final unless it goes to the Swiss appeal courts, but we'll get onto that a little bit later. So we knew that on Monday the 13th of July, which is today at 9:30, we were going to get the judgment from CAS, which made or break Manchester City, to be fair, because if the ban was upheld and they carried on with their 2-year ban, where would Manchester City have been in terms of player recruitment, Pep Guardiola? And if it went the other way, where does it leave UEFA? So it's a pretty landmark case. So the first line was that Manchester City FC did not disguise equity funding as sponsorship contributions, but did fail to cooperate with the UEFA authorities. CAS's decision: exclusion from participation in UEFA club competitions lifted, fine maintained but reduced to €10 million. So it's a massive win for Manchester City to go against UEFA, who have already done their own investigation, and win at the Court of Arbitration for Sport. I mean, they were so confident they were going to win. Everyone from the manager Pep Guardiola just yesterday smiling. I mean, when the ruling first came out, I mean, City were bullish. They said that they had grounds to appeal and that they were 100% confident that the ban would be lifted because they said they did no wrong doing. Now, it's important to notice within this ruling is that the fine isn't for Manchester City and their financial doping or alleged financial doping. The fine is for the failure to cooperate with UEFA's initial investigation. I know there's a lot of people that are thinking that City have just got a fine for alleged breaches of FFP, but it's been found that they didn't breach FFP. It's been found that they didn't comply with UEFA's initial investigation. So the fine isn't actually for FFP. So Manchester City exonerated from FFP charges, but where does this leave UEFA? Because UEFA realistically, can you trust another UEFA-led investigation when it's been found in a Court of Arbitration for Sport that the decision and the conclusion that UEFA came to couldn't be held because there wasn't enough evidence or irrefutable evidence to prosecute Manchester City. So if UEFA open up disciplinary proceedings again, can you trust that investigation? Because it's clear as day, because you can't argue with a CAS decision because it's completely unbiased, it's completely independent. And I'd be saying the exact same thing should Manchester City have been proven guilty. I would have said, look, if City get proven guilty by CAS, which is what I've said before as well, then they deserve to be abolished from Europe. They deserve everything that they get, because as much as I'm a fan, you can't argue with firstly the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and you can't argue that if rules were broken, punishments have to be given. But in this case, rules weren't broken. So where does this leave UEFA? Because, like I say, can you trust any investigation that they pursue again? And also, where does it leave FFP? We all know my views. We all know that FFP for me was not designed, but its function now, it really does keep the established clubs at the top of the pyramid. You know, we see with Newcastle, if Newcastle were to get taken over by the Saudi-led consortium, they couldn't put their own money into it. They'd have to just try and build that business. And when you've got a club like Newcastle who, for instance, doesn't have the same commercial growth as Manchester United, then there's always going to be an unlevel playing field. I think in business, which we see with every business, if they get taken over or they have investment, then they use that money to grow. And you can't take Newcastle from the club that it is now to European Cup competition in a matter of years because of this financial fair play ruling. I do think there's a purpose there to stop clubs overspending and to stop clubs going bust. But let's be honest, if a team like Newcastle or Manchester City or Chelsea, any club which has got a lot of money, then they're not going to go bankrupt. They're not going to overspend. So I do think it's there. To be honest, I think the intentions were good, but I do think it just keeps that established view. I mean, Man City were lucky that they could spend before the financial fair play ruling came in, but I do think it needs to be looked at. And does financial fair play have a role to play after this ruling? I still think it does, because like we said with the CAS ruling, Manchester City didn't break any of those rules according to CAS. So who knows what is going to happen, but it's a huge victory for Manchester City in terms of the future of their club. Where does that leave UEFA? Do you think Manchester City were guilty? Let me know in the comments below. Hopefully I've shed a little bit of light on there. So yeah, massive ruling, massive day for, well, football in general. That is the ruling. Manchester City's ban has been wiped off. They will play in Europe next season. So let me know in the comments below what you think of that. Subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. Like the video as well, and we'll see you next time.